One metaphor that reoccurs in the text is that of a legal proceedings or trial. Job wants to bring God to a court of law and plead his case. He says directly, quote, "I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God." He wants to give evidence of his innocence, claiming, quote, "I have indeed prepared my case. I know that I shall be vindicated," end quote. He demands that God tell him what he did wrong so that he can defend himself. He laments that his accuser does not show himself and meet him face to face. At the end of his last speech, Job says, quote, "Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary." So taking God to court might sound like a somewhat odd idea, but in fact it fits well with the Hebrews' conception of their relation to their God. As noted, the covenant that God makes with the patriarchs is a kind of legal relation or agreement. Thus, if Job believes God to be breaking the agreement or not holding up his side, then it would make sense that he would seek legal recourse to correct it. This metaphor is important for the outcome of the story. At the end, God comes and from a whirlwind addresses Job. In this famous speech, he recounts in a beautiful way and at great length all of the things in the universe that he has created and organized, awing the listener with his powerful wisdom and infinite strength. The form of this response is important. Instead of simply telling Job these things, God puts everything in the form of a question addressed to Job. God says at the outset, "I will question you, and you shall declare to me." So here again, the confrontation is framed in terms of a kind of legal proceeding. Thus, Job gets exactly what he asked for, a trial where he can face his accuser. But what Job has not reckoned with is that at a trial, the accuser also has the chance to cross-examine, and this is precisely the form that God's speech takes. He is ostensibly cross-examining Job by asking him questions, but the content of the questions is intended to give Job a greater appreciation for God's infinite power and wisdom. The culmination of the story occurs after God's speech, which overwhelms Job, who is taken aback by God's long series of pressing questions. Realizing that he himself, as a mere mortal, can never have any real insight into this, Job immediately repents. Showing great contrition and humility, he confesses, quote, "I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know." He concludes, quote, "I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." So the conclusion that the writer wants to convey is that while one might believe that one sees injustice in the world, this is merely a mistaken impression, since one doesn't fully understand the ways of God. In other words, one shouldn't complain when one sees apparent injustices in the world, since to do so presumptuously impugns God's plan and wisdom. This is the traditional interpretation of the moral of the story of Job.